Hi guys, this is Matt with another episode of Game On Home Edition. Today I want to talk a little bit about contested roles in opposed combat. This is something that I've thought about for a long time and done in some of my games, but I just wanted to talk about some of the principles about how to make combat a little bit more realistic, but still not keep it flowing nicely in the game and not bog down the pace too much. So, pretty much every RPG involves players taking turns attacking, right? But that's not really how a fight in the real world actually unfolds. Whether we're talking about armed combat or unarmed combat, and that's anything from a street fight to a boxing match to fencing to medieval knights wailing on each other with broadswords, whatever it is, at least half the battle is defending against the other guy's attack. The first line of defense, of course, is just not being where the attack lands. So that talks about dodging. Most systems have dodge rules to one extent or another, and some are better than others. So I'm not going to say too much about that here because analyzing dodge rules would obviously be pretty system specific, and I want to keep the discussion here more general. But the general things I will say about dodging are too many systems make it consume a full action in a round, or too much of your action in a round, and that's silly. If you watch a boxing match, for example, a fighter slips an opponent's punch, not in lieu of throwing a return punch, but to position himself to return it. So dodging should be a simple, quick bonus action in the round, whatever your specific system calls it. You get the idea. But it shouldn't consume their entire action or the entire round. And dodging is not an all or nothing thing. Like, a lot of games will treat it as if you successfully dodged, you didn't get hit, or you didn't successfully dodge and you got fully hit. It can be partially successful. And that would result in an attack being off target or having reduced impact or damage. And that's equally true for hand-to-hand, melee weapons, even ranged weapons. And dodge is really the only way to deal with defense for ranged combat, so you want to make sure it works right in your system. The type of defense that I want to actually spend most of my time talking about today, and that too often gets the short end of the stick in terms of game mechanics, is blocking or parrying attacks. In a real fight involving opponents with any significant amount of skill, many, if not most, of the attacks are blocked. Boxers block punches, fencers parry slashes and stabs, even heavy weapons like swords and axes get parried or blocked with shields. But most systems get the activity all wrong. And what I mean by that are the following. Like blocking or parrying using a shield. This is pretty common in D&D and lots of other games of that type. It's not a passive activity. Like, you don't just get a benefit of a shield by having one. You have to use it. And that requires a positive action. Where the system most frequently fails is that a shield does not increase the opponent's difficulty to hit you. Or indirect versions of that same idea, like raising the shield bearer's armor class, for example. And it's just the opposite is true, in fact. If your movement is hampered by a big clumsy shield, you're probably easier to hit. What the shield does is absorb or deflect damage, but it only does that if it's successfully used. Mechanically, I suggest making a shield a simple action roll, and you do that at the start of the round. If the player rolls a success, then you reduce the damage taken from attacks that come in during that round. That's a more accurate way to use a shield or have a shield play a role in your game. If you want to take it a step further, You could even give the shield a damage roll, just like a weapon. The player rolls to use it, and then rolls to see how much damage the shield soaks from attacks during that round. I would make that a single roll at the beginning of a round rather than rolling for every attack, just to keep things simple and moving faster. But the idea is you roll for your shield, roll the damage on the shield, and that's how much damage your shield absorbs from incoming attacks. Now, with unarmed hand-to-hand combat, blocking techniques are even more effective. At least half the focus of martial arts training, for example, of various types, centers on how to block, deflect, or redirect your opponent's attack. Disciplines like Judo are entirely built around that. So the question is, how do we accommodate defense in hand-to-hand combat without reducing the action pace to a crawl? Now, it's tricky, but it can be done. Probably the best way is to have players make simultaneous opposed rolls at their respective skill levels. A more skillful fighter should have an advantage avoiding a block attempt, for example. But again, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. If an attacker rolls higher, the attack lands normally with full damage. If the defender rolls higher, the block is at least partially successful. I suggest making the damage scale to the difference between rolls. Like, a narrow success means your proportionately smaller amount of damage is blocked, right? So the scale will vary a lot between systems, so you'll need to use common sense and your familiarity with the system. But it shouldn't be that hard. If you want to keep it simple, just set a successful block at a fixed half damage, for example. And then you can just say, okay, well, if you didn't block, you took the full damage. If you successfully block, you take half damage. You don't, in my opinion, I go back and forth on whether or not you would ever want a block to be 100% effective. And although that might actually be more realistic to the way that some combat actually happens in the real world, I suggest against it from a mechanics standpoint, because then a successful block becomes functionally a miss, which will drag out your combat unnecessarily. If somebody makes a successful 2-hit roll, they should get some benefit from that, even if their opponent blocks. So I would just stick with something like either scaled damage or a fixed half damage for a successful block roll. I would also consider common sense rules for limiting counterattacks by players who have attempted to block, whether it was successful or not. For example, a player who used their right arm to block an incoming punch might be required to make their subsequent attacks for that round using only their left, or perhaps a foot or a knee or a headbutt or whatever, but not the occupied right hand. And if that incurs an offhand attack penalty as a result, because they're using their offhand, so be it. I mean, there should be some trade-offs to using a rule like this or trying to accommodate realism. If you want to get even more advanced, you can create a special class of attack to approximate something like a judo throw that uses an attacker's momentum or their own attack against them. That's a special case, which again will vary a lot depending on the system, how well that works or how well you can integrate that. But I've done something like that, and I've gone about it in the following way. I would say that the character who's attempting a throw like this or to redirect an attack has to be specifically and specially trained and at an appropriately high skill level. This is not something that you should let a novice character be able to even attempt, because otherwise you're going to have everybody trying it all the time, and that's not the purpose here. It should be a special thing. And mechanically, I would do it, have them roll this special maneuver like they would a block as a contested roll, but with a higher degree of difficulty to accommodate its higher skill required. The success redirects the incoming attack if they hit that high skill roll. It redirects it into an automatic counterattack which delivers the damage of the originating attack back at the attacker. And then maybe some other sort of common sense effects, like it tosses them past the attacker and they end up on the same distance on the other side. Or maybe it renders them prone, or something like that, that approximates something like a judo throw. And the last thing I would say about it is, I would make a maneuver like that expensive, meaning it should consume that character's full attack action. They shouldn't be able to do a judo throw and then do something else offensive in that combat round. It would just make that type of thing too powerful. So you want to make it consume the whole action. Now, there's a million other things that you can do too, which maybe I won't go into this time in any kind of detail, although if people are interested, I could certainly do another video where you can actually break down combat maneuvers, particularly hand-to-hand maneuvers, into types of attacks, rather than just, you try and hit him. Well, do you punch him? Do you kick him? Are you throwing a roundhouse? Are you throwing a jab? Are you throwing an uppercut? There's all kinds of different types of hand-to-hand attacks, and almost as many with weapons too. So you can get as specific as you want to, although again, you run the risk of bogging down your attack or making it overly complicated. So I would put an asterisk on that and say, use with caution. But sometimes it can be fun, and you can put a lot of special effects into attacks that make combat a lot spicier and more interesting and more involved, which is sometimes the problem with combat for role player types, is that it's just too generic, and I hit him, he hits me, I do X number of points and he does X number of points. And so things to make it more engaging can be good, but we'll cover that some other time maybe. For now, I guess I'll just leave it there and say, give some thought to your systems and how you can incorporate sort of opposed tests seamlessly and quickly, because you don't want it to slow combat down, but you do want to enhance the drama and the realism, and contested roles can really do that. So anyway, that's what I got for now. Hopefully that's interesting to you guys, and maybe you have some ideas on how to incorporate those or other ideas into your own games. And feel free to share them in the comments below, and things that you've tried or seen tried or would like to try, and we can talk about them in another video. Until next time, game on, guys, and thanks for watching.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. We'd like to shout out a couple of the tabletop dungeoneers. First, we'd like to shout out the Beard Clipper. He does a lot of wargaming as well as crafting. The second person we'd like to shout out is Facility D20. They do everything from magic to painting to wargaming as well. And lastly, if you're really mad at Justin for putting the Starfinder game in a C, go check out the Maple Table. They like Starfinder as well as Pathfinder, so if you have any interest in that, go check them out as well. We'll have all the links in the description below. Thank you guys again for watching.